And I've spoken to many fire department and police people throughout the years, and they said it's just overwhelming. And so I feel like prohibition as a whole is it's silly to even consider, because you're just going to perpetuate illegal activity. You're going to perpetuate the buying of illegal fireworks, which we know are much different than the Oregon's local safe and sane that we have had for, I mean, gosh, as long as I can remember. We don't have anything that leaves the ground. We don't have anything that explodes. And so, being able to celebrate in a cul-de-sac or in a safe area, I think is completely reasonable. I think that if you try to prohibit and do a complete prohibition of it, it's unreasonable, because it's just going to perpetuate illegal activity. And we are not going to have safe and sane fireworks that are purchased over the border in Washington. What we're going to have is aerials and explosives and things that are absolutely a greater, higher danger than what we do and deal with here in Oregon and here in the Lane County area. And so I think that that's my absolute stance on it, is that prohibition doesn't work as a whole. It's not reasonable. And so I think that if we give people an opportunity to have something that's safe and sane, that's more realistic. I do agree with a ban on certain areas of the city. I'm not opposed to the South Eugene ban, like in the more high-risk areas. I think that that's completely realistic and reasonable. And I also support complete criminalization of illegal fireworks, because I think it hurts what we try to do in a very safe and sane fashion. So the bad guys hurt the good guys, and it makes it bad for everyone. And even this year in fireworks sales, I made a very big point of telling people, do not go over the border, do not bring illegal fireworks. Like, you are going to hurt this for everyone else if you act stupid and light off illegal fireworks, because they are not safe. And, in our fire danger, and I personally train and equip people on how to most safely use fireworks that we sell here in Oregon.
Thank you for your public comment.
Absolutely.
Our next speaker is Aaron Taylor, followed by Randy Groves. Aaron, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Aaron, I show you are self-muted. There you go.
Yeah, is unmuted? Are we good now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I want to thank you guys for taking even this on and addressing it and making a public forum for it. I know it's highly charged political by nature, and I know your intentions are all well, and I appreciate that. As Christy said, I would agree that safe and sane in Oregon fireworks, that's what they're called, safe and sane. They are safe and sane and called that. Excuse me. They are safe and sane and called that for a reason. And that is that they don't leave the ground, that they are within a parameter that is considered safe and controllable. I just want you to ask yourselves, when has prohibition ever helped long term? And once there's a prohibition, immediately the gossip and the rumors go around. People start buying fireworks from out of state. They start finding and selling fireworks. It's already happens. Will happen much worse. And some of the facts this year, where like they shut down Portland, when they did that, it didn't immediately, because it was so close to the window that it didn't immediately happen, but it started happening within weeks. And then people were beginning to light off illegal fireworks, because if you're going to do it, you're going to find the ones that are illegal, typically. And that's what's been happening. And so historically, I would like to see us stay with what the state mandate is, which is safe and sane. The noise ordinance already covers noises where they're too loud. And so those things are already in place. As far as what causes fires, fireworks aren't a major issue. And what causes deaths in car accidents? We don't take alcohol out and say you can't have any alcohol. We manage it. And drunk driving is illegal and there's a stiff fine. But lighting off illegal fireworks doesn't have a stiff fine, and they're the ones that are the problem. You will literally almost never, outside of just stupidity and carelessness, find a fire started by fireworks. It's 100 to 1 about cigarettes, but we're not going to stop cigarettes. We limit them, we tax them, we don't stop them. Prohibition doesn't work, taking away freedoms. And then if you talk about it, yes, there's some vets that have problems with the noise. That's not a safety issue. But almost every vet I know is in favor of the freedom to be able to celebrate and do fireworks. My own father had trouble and confusion as he got older, but it was a 1 or 2 day issue, and we were able to walk him through it. So I just think it's important to not let this be an emotional decision.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Randy Groves, followed by Anthony Hopper. Randy, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Chair Bernie and members of the Lane County Board of Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to speak to 2106. My name is Randy Groves. I'm the Eugene City Councilor representing Ward 8, which is southwest Eugene with a large forest urban interface area. I'm also the former Eugene Springfield Fire Chief and completed an almost 37-year service in the fire service. I'm here to speak in support of 2106. I've responded to many calls in our community that have been started by fireworks, primarily illegal fireworks, but I've seen it from both. I've also experienced response to many injuries that are caused by fireworks. In this time of a warming climate and watching the conditions in our forested areas, but also in the flats with brush drying out more every year and our fire season expanding into longer periods of time, I think that this is a measure that would be timely. I intend to also pursue this with colleagues on the City Council for the city, but I do want to be clear. Today I am speaking for myself. I am not representing the Eugene City Council nor the city of Eugene. At the same time, based on my many years of experience, I believe in doing everything we can to remove sources of ignition and incendiary devices from being discharged in our forest urban area and our whole county. I personally would like to see a complete ban, but I realize that may not be realistic at this point. I also want to say that my understanding of 2106 was that it wasn't during times of declared fire emergencies, but during times of declared fire season, which is a longer period of time. And if that is correct, I think that's maybe important to acknowledge at some point during your deliberations so that we understand exactly what the intent of 2106 is. The other thing I want to speak to, I've also responded to calls where people were having mental episodes because of the concussions that were created by the discharge of fireworks. It especially affects people with PTSD, as you know, as well as both domestic and wild animals and wildlife. So again, I just want to sum this up by saying I encourage you to move in this direction, and I appreciate you having this thoughtful process. I also would like to be involved in the future if we talk about other measures of reducing the fire risk in Lane County. Thank you.
Ms.
Thank
Jones,
you for your public. Yes.
forgive me, and I know this is a violation of protocol, but Mr. Dingle, I read the script, but I believe Mr. Groves is correct. This wasn't for during a declared fire emergency. Was it not for a declared fire season?
Chair Bernie, that's correct. Yes, if you look at the definition of at 6.901 sub 2 sub C, fire season has the same definition as ORS 477.001 sub 7. So this was, I think we discussed this year that this that I believe my recollection is that fire season was declared June 11th or June 15th of this year.
Okay, but for proper messaging, we are talking about a declared fire season.
Correct, not a fire emergency. That is correct.
I'm so sorry to interrupt protocol here. I apologize, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Burney. At this time, I will unmute Anthony Hopper's microphone. Anthony will be followed by Deborah Killian. Anthony, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hey, thank you so very much for taking the time to hear us today. Speaking on the fireworks ban, I too have participated for many years in raising money for local charities and local programs through the sales of fireworks. And to address it just from the standpoint of these individual programs first, the cost of what this is, and having to know what a declared fire season is, these products have to be ordered several months in advance. And local outreaches, schools, churches, different areas of faith, different local community outreach programs that help youth and homeless and veterans and all sorts of things all over this town participate in this every year. And for our group alone, even, it's more than $500,000 of an investment that if has to be ordered at a certain time, then a declared fire season takes that away. You are bankrupting and you are putting at very high risk a lot of local youth and outreach programs, and the ramifications of what these would be huge. And on a personal note, it's, even like Mr. Groves said about the fire response, but even he himself said it was primarily illegal fireworks. We don't even have an infrastructure in place that properly polices illegal fireworks. So to say that we can ban them all and successfully have that, what we will essentially be doing is taking it away in Lane County, which will make people travel to other areas. We're going to increase fire dangers for other counties surrounding us, or just like people already currently do with the illegal fireworks, instead of setting them off in their asphalt driveways or homes or where there's concrete and there's water sources readily available so those that are responsible can put them out properly, we're going to drive people into outlying areas near Fern Ridge and other areas where there's large grassy underbrush and everything else. And we're going to drive them to those areas further away from police and fire response to set off even the safe and sane and the smaller ones. We're going to exponentially increase a fire danger. So prohibition has never really worked. We can't stop everything. My personal opinion is that we would be far, far more ahead as a community, setting community guidelines and actually enforcing community guidelines instead of putting resources and just legislation in place, putting action in place to enforce what we already have in place and see how that works before we continue to just write legislation to pile on top of legislation that's not even being properly enforced at this time. Thank you guys very much for your time today. And I know you have a huge decision ahead of you and a lot of things to consider, not just the safety of our community, but the different impacts that these decisions have on our community as a whole. And, those of us that are trying to reach our community and make it a better, safer, more wonderful Lane County for all the residents. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for your public comment. I do apologize, I misspoke. Deborah Killian has already spoken, so I will now go to Ronna Frank. Ronna, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Ronna Frank. 3 months ago on May 20th, the Springfield mayor told me he did not support a fireworks ban. But after I received and read the wildfire risk to the Thurston Hills in Springfield's 2020 Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, NHMP, required by FEMA, and the 2020 Community Risk Assessment Report for Eugene and Springfield, on June 22nd, other residents and I emailed the city of Springfield those two documents, asking them to acknowledge they had seen and read them. That night, the mayor on his forum announced he would not ban fireworks, and 2 days later, the city council said the same. No one replied to our email. The NHMP states wildfire hazard is primarily located in the South Hills of both Eugene and Springfield, where forested areas interface directly with homes, businesses, and infrastructure, specifically naming the Thurston Hills in Springfield as an area of concern. Springfield and Lane County emergency managers and interim fire chief Chris Heppel contributed to this document. The city council unanimously voted for it. Previous mayor signed it, and it was adopted on February 18th, 2020. The Eugene Springfield Fire Department forwarded their major 2020 Community Risk Assessment Report to the Springfield City Council as an item in their September 28, 2020 council meeting materials, with the current mayor and all city councilors present. This report identifies the significant risks of wildfire in the wildland-urban interface areas of Eugene and Springfield, specifying the southeast portion of Springfield with the Thurston Hills. Quote, during the hot summer months, when fine dry fuels cure and live foliage moisture drops, these interface areas pose a significant threat for rapid fire growth and potentially loss of property and lives. On June 26 of this year, 2 residents had an email from the previous council president saying, that assessment was focused in Eugene and not anywhere in Springfield, as far as I am aware. They each emailed him that document, pinpointing the wildfire risk to southeast Springfield and Thurston Hills. He replied to one that he was never provided a copy of that report, and to the other that he was just provided a copy of the assessment for the first time. Because he and the rest of the city council either never read that information or ignored it, that means they refused to ban fireworks in the Thurston Hills without knowledge of those wildfire risks or ignored them. Either one is indefensible. Chair Burney said at your July 13th meeting, I think what's driving this is our desire to not have wildfires and desire for safety. I know all commissioners agreed with him, and that's why I'm asking you to acknowledge the documented dangers of wildfires in the Thurston Hills and amend your ordinance to include a ban on fireworks there for a 3rd reading. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not see any additional hands up. However, I'm going to call upon Douglas Sackett. I don't see, oh, there, your hand's up. Please note, if you've already given testimony, we are only allowing people to give testimony for one 3-minute period. So if I've already called on your name, I won't be able to call upon you again. Mr. Sackett, if you would like to give your public testimony, I'm going to unmute your microphone and you can begin your public comment. I'm sorry if I'm calling on you and you don't want to give public comment. Mr. Sackett, you are unmuted.
Deb, you unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, commissioners, to listen to my remarks. I am in total support of the ordinance 2106. I'm Doug Sackett. My wife Norma and I, we live on South 71st Street in Springfield, up in the Thurston Hills, and are surrounded by tall 100 to 200 foot trees, fir trees. We purchased our home on June 20th of 2016. We moved here to enjoy the serene and quiet neighborhood, and we live on a 1-lane road, and it's very difficult to move over for oncoming vehicles. And it would be very difficult for a fire engine to traverse the road and also turnaround possibility. We were evacuated last year because of the Holiday Farm fire and never want to experience that situation again. We left our home and didn't know whether we would have home to come back to. I have never been so scared in my life, driving through the smoke and blacker than midnight red and orange skies. I mention this because of the present time, this state is under extreme drought conditions and our trees are very dry. Even the governor has put a ban on any outside burning and abolished campfires and banned the use of landscape machinery due to potential sparking from the equipment and possibly hitting rocks that could cause sparks. One spark in the underbrush could catch the extremely dry timber on fire, and these woods would be destroyed with possible human lives. We are very concerned by not having a ban of fireworks in Springfield and the Thurston Hills. We have a recipe for potential disaster, which could destroy our properties and potentially our lives. It's very difficult for me to comprehend that you're talking about banning fireworks in the unincorporated towns and not caring for 61,000 plus Springfield residents and 173,000 plus Eugene residents. Even Chairman Joe Burney lives in the Thurston Hills and Congressman Peter DeFazio. So you don't care what could happen to your property and your family? We are pleading for a ban on fireworks and the sales and manufacture of them in Springfield, or at least in the Thurston Hills. Please, at one time, forget the political side and check your heart and soul and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not see any other hands being raised for public comment. I'll ask one last time if anyone who's registered for this meeting wants to speak on this item. And Chair Bernie, I do not see any other hands going up, so I will return the public hearing to you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. And thank you everyone that has commented. Do any commissioners have a conflict of interest that they wish to declare on this issue? Seeing none. While my script says the public hearing for Ordinance 21-06 is now closed, do commissioners want to close the public hearing, or would you like to discuss even further deliberation for a third reading? I really need to get input from commissioners before we close this permanent. Yes, Vice Chair Farr.
I'm in favor of closing the public hearing and proceeding with the deliberation.
Commissioners Buck and Trieger. Okay. The public hearing for Ordinance 2106 is now closed. Is there a motion so that we can discuss and debate the motion? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of the second reading, closing of the hearing, and to approve Ordinance 21-06 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 6 to adopt a fireworks ban and other restrictions during a declared fire emergency.
Thank you very much. And is there a second? Forgive me.
No, she's just reading the minutes.
I'll second.
We hear another microphone there somewhere. Commissioner Buck has moved adoption of Ordinance 2106 in the matter of amending Lane Chapter Code, Chapter 6 to adopt a fireworks ban and other restrictions during a declared fire emergency. Again, Mr. Dingle, I would really like to say during a declared fire danger or drought or whatever it is that the state declares.
Fire season.
Fire season. Thank you very much.
As defined in ORS 477.001 subset.
Thank you very much. It has been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everybody's testimony today. We have heard from folks for several months now, since before July 4th on this particular subject. And I truly do appreciate everybody who has lent a voice to this particular discussion. I feel strongly that this is within the best policy that we as a county can provide on this subject. There are certainly more discussions to be had as to what starts fires in Lane County, but this is one that has been going on for years and years. And now we see the repercussions of what damage fireworks could do, especially during a fire season from the events of the gorge. And now the outpouring of folks who know the danger of mega fires in Lane County. I support this particular ordinance. I do so mainly on the basis of public safety for people's lives, their property, and our natural environment. I hope that other commissioners feel the same and vote yes on this particular ordinance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Chair, I echo Commissioner Buck's comments and statement and am fully supportive of everything that she just stated. And I just want to restate from, I think it was our first maybe work session on this before we even had a draft ordinance. Oftentimes there are policies that need to change, but there's culture that needs to change that goes along with it. We are in a very different place as a community when it comes to what is and isn't safe and what are and are not appropriate or safe ways to celebrate events. So I am fully in support of a more complete ban ultimately and eventually, but recognize that that needs to be done staged in. And so at this time, I'm supportive of this ordinance that's before us. But I do think, you know, when we know better, we do better, as Maya Angelou said. We know better about what's really safe, clearly around fire and fire danger, particularly in this extreme drought. And as we talked about in our emergency preparedness portion of the meeting earlier, a good couple of rainfalls in the winter season doesn't make drought condition go away necessarily. So we're in this with a lot of dry tinder and trees for a very long time. In addition to some of the ancillary issues that have been raised in other work sessions around the impact on wildlife, on domestic animals, on people with PTSD, and the injuries experienced, particularly by young children, that fireworks cause. But again, I realize that a complete ban, you know, it's not, we can't just make that quick of a turnaround. So I'm supportive of this ordinance. I'm supportive also of us continuing throughout the winter months to explore what could be done in advance of next year and beyond, to sort of on-ramp us into perhaps some more encompassing ordinances around fireworks, sales, manufacture, and usage, particularly personal usage in our county. I want folks who testified to know, I really appreciate everyone's comments and all of the emails we received, but we're also doing this ordinance for the unincorporated areas because that's our authority, that's our jurisdiction, unless we take this up as the Board of Health. And so it's not about not caring or not having concern for the larger metropolitan areas. Speaking of those larger metropolitan areas, I want to especially appreciate former Fire Chief Groves for his comments, and let him and other members of the Eugene City Council who I've been in touch with on this issue know that I very much want to partner with them. And tell anyone who has emailed us or called in with testimony who lives in an incorporated city to please work with your own elected city officials and encourage and ask them to pass whatever kind of measures you'd like to see them pass on this issue. And eventually, hopefully, we can come together with the footprint of Lane County being a safer place for folks when it comes to fireworks. Lastly, I want to say that I understand that a lot of nonprofits and religious organizations use fireworks sales for fundraising. That is centered around the 4th of July, so that's already happened for this year. Another reason we need a good on-ramp and reasonable timeline for any kind of more all-encompassing ban is to give folks a chance to pivot to a different fundraising strategy. That's something nonprofits are good at, is being nimble and adaptive to changing landscapes around fundraising. So with the right amount of time and community support, I think that can be overcome. And one last question I have for County Council is, I think I asked this in a last meeting, but forgive me, I didn't take good notes. The time during which sales are even allowed is already of limited duration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but I believe I looked up the statute and read it to you, and I believe it was like, I want to say it was sometime in May that it can start.
That's what I thought. Thank you. It's basically a fairly short window already that fireworks can be legal, personal use fireworks can legally be sold. And it is all pretty much centered around 4th of July. And of course, people do sometimes stockpile and buy them so they can use them for birthdays and weddings and New Year's and so on. But it's also that stockpiling that's part of the danger that becomes an ignition source. So all that to say, I'm very supportive of this ordinance as a first step, not as a final action to keep our community safe from the dangers of fireworks. And later, when we get to future agenda assignments, I'm going to be asking for something a work session that I hope will give us a little more information and help in fire prevention more broadly, not specifically and only related to fireworks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Yes, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Mr. Dingell, I have a couple of questions for you, and it's surrounding predominantly the difference between fire emergency and fire season. And I understand there is a difference between the two. The first question is that the ordinance is stated in its title, fire emergency. Is it admissible to exchange the word fire season for fire emergency without having a third reading?
Chair Bernie, Commissioner, or Vice Chair Farr, yes, it doesn't substantively change it because, as I said, the controlling portion of the ordinance is what's in the body of the ordinance, and in the body of the ordinance, like I said, at sub 2, sub C is fire season, but you can certainly substitute that. That's a non-substantive change that would not require a third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle, and I would expect that the maker and seconder would allow a friendly amendment to make that exchange of language in the title. The second question is regarding definition. A fire season varies from year to year. I have experience with that. This year, it was very early that the fire season was declared, and it was declared, as I recall, by the state of Oregon, not by local authority. Is that correct, Mr. Dingwall?
It is correct, and that is again in the body of the ordinance, Vice Chair. What I did is I incorporated the Oregon revised statutes, and you'll notice that it talks about when the Oregon State Forester, and that is there's a specific definition and authority for the state forester to declare the beginning of fire season in any recognized fire district. So this really just pulls that into the ordinance, and that becomes the trigger.
Thank you, Ms. Dingle. And two follow-up questions regarding that. One, does this ordinance in any way give Lane County the authorities to supplant the declaration by the fire chief of the state of Oregon fire chief? In either way, to declare ahead of time, ahead of the fire chief, or to not agree with the fire chief?
No, the declaration is from the state forester.
Thank you. And then the third on that is that city ordinances encompass firework ordinances, sometimes less strict than this one, sometimes more strict than this. Does this supplant city ordinances, or do city ordinances overrule this county ordinance?
No, this, Chair Bernie, Vice Chair Farr, this ordinance is specifically, as Commissioner Trieger mentioned, this is strictly directed at unincorporated Lane County, so this would have no effect on any incorporated areas. I did want to follow up. I believe the discussion when this ordinance was being considered and discussed before it was finally drafted was that it was the board's preference to do what we've done in other similar situations like tobacco licensing and other things where we would go around, the intergovernmental relations manager and our staff would reach out to those incorporated areas with this ordinance as a template and urge them to adopt it for application within their own jurisdictions.
Thank you for the answers to those 4 questions, Mr. Dingle. They were as I expected. It doesn't remove the diciness, and I'm going to use that term, of what happens in the urban transition area. That is, areas inside of the urban growth boundary, outside of city limits that are not covered by city ordinance, that would be covered by this county ordinance. And once again, as has been noted by some of the testimony providers today, how do we enforce it? Particularly inside a densely populated area, such as the River Road area, such as Glenwood area, where we have vast areas. I don't expect an answer to that question at this point in time, Mr. Dingle. But I'll add to that on London Road, we all know London Road, there's a speed limit. Does every single person who speeds get a ticket on London Road? No. In fact, does even a majority of people get tickets? No, they don't. But the law is there in order to give people a reason to adhere to the law. We don't enforce every single law to 100% of its enforceability. So as much of a dodge as that may seem, while this ordinance doesn't give us the means to enforce it, it does put the language in place, and I will support it for that reason. I do understand Commissioner Bozovich's reluctance and actually unwillingness to support this if it does not include if it doesn't exclude manufacture. I understand that. I will still support the ordinance as written. And the last thing that I will say is regarding nonprofits. I am highly sensitive to that. Having been the executive director of Food for Lane County during the period of time when it went from very near insolvency into a very robust and well-funded organization, it is not easy to change funding streams. If it were easy, then people would add to their funding streams as opposed to exchange funding streams. It's not going to be easy for nonprofits to say, okay, we don't get money from fireworks, so let's pluck this apple off the tree. There are no such apples on the tree, but it does give people time to work on ways to replace their revenue streams. So that being said, Chair Bernie, I'm in support of the ordinance and I'm prepared to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I see that Commissioner Trieger would like to speak again.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Farr's comment reminded me I wanted to ask County Council one other question when he brought up the analogy of speeding. It seems to me that it's a great analogy in terms of we don't not have speed limits simply because we can't guarantee everyone will comply. But typically, people are only cited for speeding when a law enforcement officer sees them in the act of exceeding the speed limit. Whereas having an ordinance like this in place gives the opportunity for a complaint-driven system where an average citizen who is witnessing someone setting off or has evidence that that has been done can then register that complaint, and then the fines and violations and so on may be imposed. Is that accurate, that this would be complaint-driven rather than requiring a law enforcement official to witness the infraction? Or can you share a little bit?
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, well, it could be complaint driven. That's true. I mean, but to the extent that most crimes are complaint driven, they're reported by other people, that would still require the sheriff at some point to come out and take a complaint and take a report and find the person who did it and then issue a citation. So. But
it does give us, I think, again, as I think it was Commissioner Farr in a previous meeting brought up, it gives us a little bit of teeth in terms of liability later if there's damage caused, if an ordinance is in place, that a person can be cited and fined for violating the ordinance. Is that not true?
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, I'm not so, I think what I said at the other one was that this does, in my opinion, this does create substantial liability on the person doing it, because there's a doctrine called negligence per se. If there's a statute that says you're not supposed to do something and you do that something and you harm someone, it eliminates the requirement for the plaintiff to prove that you did something wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd just like to make a couple of comments, although they are ultimately irrelevant because we know how 3 commissioners are voting. One is, I would like to say that the environment is changing. We are experiencing hotter and drier summer seasons. Fire seasons are extending longer, and wildfires are exhausting our physical and human resources. So it's within that context that I believe this is the first time the County Board of Commissioners have even addressed this issue, and I believe it's high time. At the same time, I personally also resonate with the truth of those who stated that prohibitions don't always prohibit, and there are always other consequences. One consequence of the prohibition on alcohol was my family did well because my grandfather was a bootlegger during the prohibition. But having said all of that, I think that this is a move in the right direction. I agree with Commissioner Trieger. It's not perfect, but it's the right step. I also agree that this is the extent of the County Board of Commissioners authority. We can have greater authorities as the Board of Public Health, but that is not where this sits now. I also agree that with Ms. Frank, that the Thurston Hills and the South Hills of Eugene are the 2 highest sort of most vulnerable at risk parts of the Springfield Eugene metropolitan area. I've spoken at length with the acting fire chief who agrees with that. I will always be on the side of trying to get the city of Springfield to institute its own ban or modeling the counties. And as soon as we pass this ordinance, I will be the first to present to the Springfield City Council what the county has done and encourage them under changing circumstances to look at the same thing. We can always revisit this if in fact we find that the situation is becoming more dire and we as a public health body need to extend the reach, but at this point in time, I'm completely supportive of this measure, and I think it's a huge step in the right direction. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, Mr. Mokrahajski, given that this is an ordinance, would you please do a roll call for this vote?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Trieger.
Commissioner Trieger with technical difficulties votes aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
And Commissioner Burney.
Aye.
And sorry, I believe Commissioner Bozovich is not on the call. Is that correct?
He is not on the call, and he made it clear that he supported this unless it contained the manufacturing piece, which I believe this ordinance does contain.
Chair Burney, I think what he said was he opposed it unless the manufacturing piece was removed. So
that's not, yeah, thank you very much. But the fact is he's not on the call. Okay.
Chair Burney, I think technically, Mr. Mokrahajski, I believe that is Commissioner Bozovich is excused, correct?
Yes, he's recused. So I was going to say, so the motion passes 4 votes to 0 with Commissioner Bozovich excused. Okay.
Chair Burney, I will now turn you over to Mr. Cheney to do the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2105.
Well, yeah, actually, I was going to state this now. So we're now on agenda item 11B, which is the second reading and public hearing ordinance 21-05. In the matter of amending lane code chapter 1 to add procedures for renumbering the manual and lane code for modernization, and to update certain references and declaring an emergency. A first reading of this ordinance was held May 11th. Am I on the wrong one? No, I'm on the right one. It was held on May 11th, 2021. A second reading and public hearing was held on August 3rd, 2021. Mr. Cheney, do you want to walk us through this before I ask for input from the public?
Yes, Commissioner Burney, commissioners. As I said at the last hearing, this is a companion piece to the measure that was approved 2 weeks ago by the board for the lane manual. We're in the process of renumbering those manuals, and that means in the interim, there are 2 different reference standard ways of numbering. This ordinance is necessary so that when a section is renumbered, the new section numbers and the old section numbers are both considered valid for enforcement purposes, as they both give the public fair notice of what the ordinances are on the books.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm not interrupting you, am I, Mr. Cheney?
No, sir.
Okay. In that case, Ms. Jones, I now open the public hearing and accept any testimony in support of or in opposition to ordinance 21-05. Is there anyone that would like to provide same?
Thank you, Chair Burney. At this time, we are taking public comment for ordinance number 21-05. If you have registered to give public comment on this item, please raise your virtual hand now and I will call on you. Chair Burney, I do not see any hands being raised, so I will return the meeting to you.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have a conflict they would wish to declare on this? I can't imagine that we would. So the public hearing for ordinance 21-05 is now closed. Is there a motion? Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I move passage of second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2105 and the passage of the ordinance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, I was just about to announce it died due to lack of a second. Thank you very much, Commissioner Buck. Is there any discussion to the motion? Yes, Commissioner Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you. A quick clarification. Since this is a reading of an ordinance, any member could ask for a complete reading of the entire ordinance. Is that correct?
Well, certainly, sir. Vice Chair Farr, I would be glad to do so.
I will not do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just had a heart attack. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Cheney, we would like you to staff all of our controversial issues, apparently like this. Seeing none, I'll call the question. But since this is an ordinance, I won't call the question. Mr. Mokrahajski will please do a roll call vote.
Okay, Commissioner Trieger.
Trieger votes aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
And Commissioner Bernie.
Aye.
So it passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozievich excused.
Thank you very much. So before we begin item 11C, I believe Commissioner Buck would like to make a statement.
Thank you very much, Chair. As we go into item 11C, I need to declare a potential conflict of interest in conjunction with County Council. I am a customer of Lane Electric, and we did get a chance to touch base with the Government Ethics Commission to ensure that I can still participate. I just need to make sure that I have declared that. And I do intend to participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we are now on item 11C, Order 21-08-24-07, in the matter of entering into a contingent fee agreement for a potential Holiday Farm fire litigation and delegating authority to County Council to sign agreement on behalf of Lane County. Mr. Dingle, is there anything you would like to share with us before we begin discussion on this item?
Chair Bernie, yes, and Board of Commissioners, just very, very briefly, you'll recall that there was a discussion in executive session with the group that made a presentation to the board. I think that if I could distill down what the board's concerns were, I'll assure you that all of your concerns are addressed within this contingency fee agreement. Number one, this is not authorization to file litigation against anyone. This simply is a placeholder and has the law firm and their experts retained to bring the board information about the causes and the potential damages associated with the Holiday Farm fire. To initiate a litigation would require a vote of the board. I want to make that very, very clear. The second thing that pops up a lot of times with contingency fee agreements is whether or not the board is taking on any financial obligation. When you read through this, if you'll take my word for it, crystal clear, there is no financial obligation unless there is litigation filed or settlement obtained. So, and that includes expenses, not just attorney fees. I think those are really the two salient points, the ones that I think are on most board members' minds. And with that, I'll turn it over to the board and be happy to answer their questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Are there any questions or comments on this item from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarifying question for council. You said only fees if litigation is filed or a settlement. So if litigation is filed and we do not prevail, there could be fees incurred, or because my understanding was only if we prevail.
I'm sorry. What I'm saying is there is no financial obligation. I mean, the only way that if you look at it, the net fees the expenses only come out if there's a recovery.
Right, correct.
That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Understanding this is just a contingent fire agreement. Mr. Dingle, if this does come to fruition and we do prevail in a lawsuit and a sum is assigned to be split between the law firm and the filer of the complaint, we expressed concern kind of across the board of the board last time about the burden on the ratepayers of the district. Can you address that, or is that something that is unaddressable?
Chair Bernie, Vice Chair Farr, I think it is difficult to assess at this time because we don't know anything about what their insurance is or what the potential demand would be. What I want to emphasize to the board and to those that are listening, to the people who are listening out there, is my expectation would be that the only way that this would move forward would be that the board would receive a very detailed presentation from the law firm and their experts that have been retained to that are being retained as part of this agreement, and that the board would only authorize moving forward with litigation if, in fact, the board was satisfied that some of the one of the concerns that you've raised, Vice Chair Farr, was addressed to your satisfaction or the board's satisfaction.
Chair Bernie, thank you, Mr. Dingle.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to this particular order, I think it is our obligation as a county to move forward. We put out an exceptional amount of resources towards the Holiday Farm Fire event itself and recovery and continued recovery of that region. And it is our responsibility to dig in deeper, figure out what actually happened there, what we actually expended as taxpayers in our community as a response. And this order will start that process. Thank you.
Thank you. For the benefit of those watching, this was something that was brought to our attention through Mr. Dingle from a group that is offered at no expense to the county to at least dig in and find out if there's more that we can learn. I completely agree with Commissioner Buck's comments. I agree with all commissioners' comments. We also, I think, I'll speak for myself, just would hate to be in the position of having one public entity engage in suit against another that doesn't even have the financial resources. So at this point in time, my understanding is we move forward with an investigation at no cost to the county, and later we will learn the results of that and whether any action is taken or not. Is that correct, Mr. Ding?
Chair Bernie, that is absolutely correct. I really want to emphasize this. I think sometimes people misunderstand that once you sign this agreement that you somehow turned over all the reins with regard to litigation here. The board would have to approve the filing of litigation. The board would have to approve any negotiated settlement of litigation, if any. If there was a settlement, I mean, all of those decisions would need to be made by the board.
Thank you. And I see that Commissioner Trieger had additional comment.
Thank you, Chair. It just occurred to me because it's sometimes hard to remember what's said in executive session and what's said in public session. Just wanted to mention, I took it upon myself to research this firm a bit and learn a bit about their genesis and who these folks are and why they started this collective that is working to support communities that have incurred loss from wildfire. And I would just encourage anyone watching who maybe has concerns to do the same. The name of the firm is in the cover memo in our packet, and just to better understand who these folks are and what their motivation is for approaching the county with an offer to represent.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, that's a very good point. This is a firm that specializes in recovering fire damages on behalf of public entities, and you are correct. During the executive session, they explained they were very acutely aware that the issue that Commissioner Bernie had mentioned, and that they believe they have a way to address it.
Are there any additional comments or questions? Then is there a motion? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move Order 21-08-24-07 as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Order 21-08-24-07 has been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there a discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of Order 21-08-24-07 moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let the record show that Order 21-08-24-07 has been unanimously approved by commissioners present, 4-0, Commissioner Bozovich excused. Thank you, Mr. Dingle. This now we're at the last item under County Council. Do you have any announcements for the board?
Chair Bernie and Board of Commissioners, I do not.
Thank you very much, sir. We are now on item 12.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Before we move on from County Council, may I ask a question of Council?
Of course you may.
About potential future. I just, I understand the independent redistricting committee has met, and there've been some hopefully minor bumps in the road early on in the process of seating that committee. And so I wondered if now is the time to ask some questions, or if that's on our agenda for our next meeting to get an update about how that's going.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, it's really been turned over to Ms. Williams. I'd be happy to try and take because I have been communicating with Ms. Williams, and we are taking notes about some of the issues that have cropped up for, I'll give you one example that I discussed with Ms. Williams last week. The original 5 we're trying to figure out, because the language was actually intentionally broad about how the characteristics or the process that should be used to select the next 10, which was to be inclusive and include all those different things. And there's been some clarity. They were questioning whether or not that meant they had to pick so many from a particular district. So that's just one example of what we've been working with, and one of those questions, because I think we all agreed that at the time that we undertook this process, that at the end of it, there would be a little sort of review session, and that it was almost expected that there would be little tweaks that would need to be made to the ordinance and to the process based upon our learning experience.
Thank you. Well, maybe backing up a minute to where the ultimate accountability and responsibility for this project lies. And I understand it's been the sort of organizing of the committee and facilitating those meetings have been delegated to Ms. Williams, but is this project overall not still live within County Council's office and purview?
I guess that's a good question, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger. I am, once Ms. Williams took over, she took over the administrative aspects of it. It's my understanding that my role and my office's role is there to provide legal advice. So for example, explaining the public meetings law, explaining the law surrounding redistricting, explaining what I think if there's an ambiguity or a question about what the ordinance means. But it is Ms. Williams is the one who is noticing meetings, staffing the meetings, keeping track of minutes. Again, right at this point, my role is limited to legal advice and that type of support.
I see.
I would like to state that it's been challenging for me to have only looked at 5 applications from my particular district when I learned after the fact that 8 had come in. And that's a significant issue. It's not one that we can go back in time and correct. And I know that the five appointments commissioners made will be choosing the others, and that this group that was overlooked will still be part of the pool they choose. But that to me, for something of this gravity, is it's an issue. And I understand it was just a simple glitch, but nonetheless, that becomes important.
Chair Bernie, yeah, and that's a good point. What Ms. Williams and I have been able to figure out, and she's certainly contacted TS is, Technology Services is, there's just no explanation from them about where they went in the cybersphere. I know that I had difficulty with their filter catching some of those. So I went through and, I quickly started from the beginning. I went back and looked and went through my filter, but the other thing was we just don't know. And they went back and were unable to reconstruct. I will say that what I understand Ms. Williams has done, and what I certainly recommended, is that if an individual forwarded the email that showed that they had submitted their application by the deadline, the deadline that had been set for applications, that it would be considered. That's my understanding. That's been done.
I know we're veering from announcements. These are supposed to be your announcements to us.
Happy to answer the board's questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dingle. Are there any other? I know you don't have any other items for us. Is the board ready to move on? Although Steve, do you know when we will have? I'm sorry, Steve Mokrahysky. Can you provide clarity to Commissioner Trieger's question as to where the responsibility now lies for this process, and when this will be brought back sort of for a status report to the Board of Commissioners?
Sure, and I wasn't prepared to give an update on that today, but certainly next week I'd be happy to have Ms. Williams join me for under county administrator announcements. I think that might be a nice opportunity at the very least to just provide you an update on that. It is true that she has stepped in addition to the other work that she's taken on. She is taking on the community engagement portion of this effort, and so I'd be happy to invite her next week to provide an update for you if that works for the commissioners.
No, that's great. And Mr. Dingle, we're sorry we took so much of your time. Thank you very much.
That's all right, Chair Bernie, Commissioner. I would let you know that the next I do know, because I just communicated had an email exchange today with Ms. Williams, that the next time that they're meeting is Thursday at 9:30.
Thank you, Diana.
Chair Bernie, this is Diana. Just to let you know, we do have on future agendas, the IRC bylaws are coming back on 9/21. So we do have an item scheduled for the board on this item as well.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. But this has elicited a comment or question from Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Jared. Just quickly for the board, I want to share that I still believe that the redistricting project as a whole lives within county council, even if we're planning some administrative help.
Okay. Thank you. We are now, I think, moving on to item 12, Commissioners' business. A, do commissioners have any announcements? Seeing none, and learning from our last meeting what this actually covers, are there any commissioners that have future board assignment requests? Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I want to appreciate everybody's work on the ordinance around fireworks. And as I mentioned then, I've been giving this a lot of thought and chatted with our county administrator. I've also chatted with one of our county commissioner colleagues over in Deschutes County, Commissioner Phil Chang, about some of the actions that Deschutes County has taken around fire mitigation. And they've done some really great and inventive things to support their community. For instance, they did a waiver of tipping fees for yard debris for a certain period of weeks in the late spring and early summer to reduce fuel in people's backyards, as just one example. So in talking to county administrator about this, what I would like to do, what he and I talked about, was have an assignment request, if I can get head nods, for us to receive a report from staff on the fire prevention efforts that are already in place or are being planned. at Lane County, and hear from staff what more maybe could be done, lessons learned from some other counties in our region or beyond. I'd also like it to include a timeline or a plan for engaging with the incorporated cities, as we discussed in our conversation about the ordinance, using our ordinance as a template and encouraging other cities within the county, and also perhaps some ignition source data for fires that have taken place here in Lane County and maybe in the immediate surrounding region. So the assignment request, if I have head nods, is for a work session to be scheduled to look more broadly at fire prevention efforts already underway and what other things we can be considering so that we have time to work on them in advance of next fire season.
Is there either discussion or or is there any discussion on that before I call for head nods? Okay. Head nods, thumbs up. Before I vote on that, Steve, is that, I mean, would you have, is that clear, and would that consume much staff time?
Oh, it sounds like it's a request for a work session. Well, what I heard is a request for a work session on fire prevention efforts that are in place currently and for the next year. So sort of a planning discussion. I think we certainly can have our emergency management team participate and share with you the information that they have available, and we can go from there. So,
okay, you got mine too. Thank you, Commissioner. I think that was 3 head nods. Are there any other? I'm sorry, did you have additional?
Oh, just thank you.
Oh, are there any other future board assignment requests? Yes, Vice Chair Farr.
Chair Bernie, a little bit of a difference. One, there are 2 that I'm going to mention that are already assignments. The first one is that Commissioner Trigger has asked for a work on a real moment of celebration regarding the end of COVID. That request was made, Commissioner Trigger, when we kind of thought we might see the end of it. And I'm just asking if you wanted to comment on that. Do you want to keep that on the board, and let's just keep that on hold until we can actually do that?
Thank you so much for asking, Commissioner Farr. What prompted that was we were planning to return to Harris Hall and to in-person meetings. And I didn't want us to just sort of seamlessly transition from the virtual environment to Harris Hall as if there was no reason that we had been meeting virtually all this time. And so I guess I would just, put a pin in it and say whenever it is that we get back to meeting in Harris Hall, I would like us to take advantage of and mark that occasion with some genuine acknowledgement and an opportunity for some community acknowledgement and healing, really, around all the many reasons that we were away from in-person meetings for so long. So whenever that happens, I would very much like us to consider that. Thank you for bringing that up.
And Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trigger, thank you for that clarification. The second is whipping and fanning flames. Quite some time ago, I asked for an assignment on, so I'm finding it, a work session on the statutes and codes concerning the placement of tiny homes, specifically in the Holiday Farm area, which would also apply potentially to other areas. That was assigned on August 9th, which is 3 weeks ago. I just wanted to state that this is a pretty urgent issue. We have people whose lives are completely on hold at this point in time because they cannot move a tiny home either onto a piece of property where their home, which was not insured, was burned, and I could add examples, or where they plan to build a home, but have to wait until they know exactly what the status of the property that they have is. So both situations, somebody may want to move into a home on a piece of property that's existent, where they cannot afford to build a new home yet. The other is where people would like to build a new home, but in the meantime, they have to wait in order to decide what kind of home to build. And they're living potentially living in a tiny home. So that's been assigned on August 9th. And just a reminder, this is urgent. It's not something that can be punted down the road. We do need to take action on this as quickly as possible so that people can carry on with their lives and live in a tiny home in a perfectly livable, dignified fashion and not have to worry about sprinklers or having to move it every 180 days or whatever the case may be that's preventing them from moving in right now. Thank you, Chair Bernie, and thank you, Mr. Mokrajski.
And I see Mr. Mokrajski would like to respond.
Just to say that we do have that item, the last item Commissioner Farr referenced, coming back to the board on September 28th. So just a month from now, appreciate the board's patience on this. Our LMD staff, Amber Bell, who's our planning director, is taking the lead on that. And as the board knows well, our planning staff is buried in dealing with permits and other requests and getting the new staff that's been hired up to speed. But we will be back on September 28th with that discussion. And
thank you, Mr. Mokrajski. While it may seem that I am impatient, I'm far more patient than the people who don't know where they're going to be living. Thank you.
Some of what you brought up, Commissioner Farr. I was one of those that was urging us to start meeting in person August 10th. And the rest of the board said, hold your horses. Let's just wait until August 31st and give staff time to develop the technology to support hybrid meetings. And lo and behold, here we are in another surge. There really is no silver lining here. However, Commissioner Trieger, could I offer to meet with you offline and just so we could provide maybe a little more clarity about what type of, I don't know if it would be celebration or at least acknowledgement of what's happened in the community. We have a little extra time, sadly, so we can give it to staff a little more baked.
I'd be happy to do that, Chair. And I have also I'll just share with you some conversation I had with our Chief Operations Officer, Greg Rickoff, on this topic a couple of weeks ago. So I'm happy to do that anytime.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. And Steve, for what it's worth, I really agree with Commissioner Farr's point. We're trying to process these things as quick as we can. We don't have the staff to do everything. But when you said September 28th, it's just like, oh my God, now we're into fall and now we're into winter. And I really appreciate the sentiment and passion behind what seemed like Commissioner Farr's impatience. It wasn't impatience. So for what that's worth. Okay. Are there any other?
Just one other comment on that I'll offer is that September 28th is actually 2 meetings away. So you have a meeting next week, and then you're down for 2 weeks. And
I think it's 3. Is it 2 meetings away?
Well, it's 3. Yeah, I guess it's 3 meetings away. If you say next week and then you're down for 2 weeks, and then the 21st and then the 28th.
Yeah. It's 3 meetings away, right? 5 weeks away. Are there any other future board assignment requests? Seeing none. Mr. Mokrajski, sir, a review of assignments.
So I have 2 in addition to the items Commissioner Farr mentioned that are already assignments. I have 2 new assignments from Commissioner Trieger. We'll draft a letter to the governor regarding sort of the broader call for collaboration and coordination between local and state governments regarding COVID-19. And then the second item, to schedule a work session on fire prevention efforts in place currently and for next season. And then I think we will also update the open assignment on pivoting and celebrating the great work from COVID folks to just say that when we return to in-person, when the board makes the decision to return to in-person, that we will make an effort to recognize the contributions of everybody involved there. So that's what I have.
No, thank you very much. I was going to say that sounded complete to me, but I see Commissioner Trieger's hand up.
It does. Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, I had added in the one about fire prevention work, weather ignition source data, if that's readily available and easy, basically so we can line up and see that what we're working on is actually addressing some of the primary ignition sources.
Yeah, so we can include that in the notes for that work session.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Before we break from the board meeting and move into executive session, is there any other business from commissioners? Perhaps we could do that now. Seeing none, Ms. Jones is going to read us into executive session. And why don't we say that we will reconvene at 3:05? Would that be okay? Give people a bit of a moment to, okay. Ms. Jones, if you would read us into executive session, then we will convene executive session at 3:05.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. I am reading us into executive session for Tuesday, August 24th. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. The board reserves the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.
Thank you very much, and we will see you in a few minutes.